we should apologise to the Treasurer, Wayne Swan, there, because he was getting feedback in those last couple of questions, and from someone who's been the victim of that many times, I can tell you it's very difficult to collect your thoughts when that's going on. Lenore, on the polls, should we be surprised that there was such a big turnaround in the Nielsen poll? It's a big fluctuation in a week. It's huge. A 6% fall in a single week is a big change, and it may turn out to be on the outer edge of the margin of error for these polls, which is a bit over 2%. But it's very clear that the trend is going against Labor. It's clear that Tony Abbott is improving. He's improving with female voters, and Labor has a big problem in Queensland. Now, those trends are absolutely clear. And do you think at some stage this campaign will feel like a direct contest between Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott?
Look, we just don't know. But as I was saying before, it's a crowded marriage in there because of Rudd's presence. And short of Rudd just leaving the country, leaving the party, leaving the system, that's going to continue for the next few weeks. He is the most famous face in Australia. Till a few weeks ago, he was the most powerful man in Australia. Right now, he's the most mysterious man in Australia. He's Banquo at this feast and will remain so. It can't be a two-way split, except, Barry, in one strange sense. This is an oddly balanced fight, because Julia Gillard really isn't the Prime Minister. I mean, she's been Prime Minister for a few weeks, but she doesn't bring with her the gravitas of 3 years in high office. She brings with her, of course, she's got all the bureaucratic backing she needs and all of those kinds of things. But she doesn't bring to the contest the notion that for 3 years she's been running this country. I hate the expression, but it is an oddly level playing ground. But nevertheless, would there be a view out there that a lot of this is not really her fault? I mean, the leadership was that the party encouraged her to take up the leadership. She did. She took it on, and ever since then, she's absolutely nothing that she can do to stop any of this. But Barry, doesn't all of this indicate that you have the Labor Party machine? That they are the people who are actually running the government. We had them with Rudd for 2.5 years. No, but hang on. It wasn't the machine that replaced Kevin Rudd with Julia Gillard. It was the MPs, the members of Parliament. Well, what was Paul Howes doing, gloating over the fact that, head of one of Australia's largest... He wasn't pulling the strings, but he did go on television and express an opinion. Which was foolish, but he didn't get to vote. I mean, the vote was amongst No, but he did acknowledge that he controls a number of the votes of the MPs who did vote. Piers, this is how politics works, I know. This is what David, I know how politics works. I'm saying that. I hate to use the expression, but the Liberal Party has what's called a machine. It also, oddly enough, has factions that fight viciously with one another. It has high officials and it has a caucus. They're all the same. Right, I want to take us on, though, to the substance of the latest leak, and that is that Andrew Stark, a federal policeman employed in Julia Gillard's office, sat in on National Security Committee meetings of Cabinet. Julia Gillard had this to say in Perth about that.
Now, I understand for Mr Downer and other members of the chattering classes in the Liberal Party, they might think what qualifies you to know about national security is you sit in a minister's office typing press releases all of your lives, with the greatest risk to your personal safety being a paper cut. Mr Downer might think that that's appropriate. Well, I do not. Right. Well, what we should say right there, Barry, is that there are, I think, something upwards of 10,000 federal police across Australia, many of them sitting in cars outside consulates and embassies and so forth. The mere fact that they are federal policemen does not qualify them to sit in on the highest security committee that this nation has, with all due respect to this bodyguard. Except, of course, Piers, at the time that he sat in, he wasn't a bodyguard, he was on her staff, and except that the people who do the duty with elected officials like the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister are not like the bodyguards you might see outside your average nightclub. They're people with PhDs, they're highly educated people. No, I can't believe you're trying to defend this. No, excuse me, I haven't finished. I'm not defending the idea that, say, an official should chair the meeting of the National Security
committee, not at all. But if what she's saying is true, and she sent a member of her staff to take notes at a committee meeting to report back to her, I don't think that is an entirely exceptional thing. And I think the other point that needs to be made is that under the Rudd government, the whole operation of the National Security Committee changed. Like many things under the Rudd government, the decision-making became more centralised, and I agree with you that that's a bad thing, but it meant that the National Security Committee the meetings didn't have the gravitas and didn't have the importance that they had under the previous Howard government, which also casts a different light on these stories.
Correct.
Now, I am not defending the idea that officials should chair a meeting. That's absolutely beyond the pale. But sending along a member of your staff to take notes, I don't think is actually such a terrible thing.
No, and therefore it's possibly easier to defend Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister sending his chief of staff. At least this fellow was at the apex of his organisation.
Well, I would take the opposite view. I don't think a staff member should chair it in.
No. I'm just saying it's more defensible. But if Julia Gillard, as Prime Minister, wanted the views on national security of a federal police officer, she has one. She has the Commissioner. She should speak to him.
But he wasn't a federal police officer at the time, Piers. He was a member of her staff.
Just more generally on this whole question of the way the Cabinet operates, and I think this news conference in Perth coincided with advice going to Julia Gillard and to others within the party that it's about time they became a little more aggressive and went on the attack. This is what she had to say about the way that Cabinet has operated and will operate in the future.
If I am re-elected and on the 22nd of August I have the ability to implement my better economic plan, to be there improving schools and hospitals, that if that happens and I am Prime Minister, I will run a traditional system of Cabinet government. You can say what you like in the room, full and frank discussions, because that's the best way of getting to the most thought-through outcome. You leave the room, you say a word, you lose your job.
Now, do you take there that there is a little more aggression in her approach?
I think she's certainly there is, and I think she's being advised to sort of lose some of the control, and I think that's certainly a good thing. I think Labor started this campaign with the idea that Julia Gillard could put on the white jackets and run a very generalised message capitalising on her newness. They would run a marginal seat campaign underneath that, and Bob's your uncle. It's not working. And when the leaks become the story, she's got nowhere to hide and nowhere to go, and she looks over-scripted and over-controlled. And I think it would be a very good thing if she just started talking like she used to talk before she put on the white jacket.
Be careful talking about her clothing. You'll have David at your throat any moment, Lenore.
Well, you wrote a column about her clothing this week, attacking her for wearing Xenia, and yet you turn out here today, clearly in Armani, head to foot.
Can I give you one more? Just before you go on, Piers, I'll give you one more example of Julia Gillard and what appears to be a much more aggressive response. Here she is talking about Tony Abbott and industrial relations.
Part of the better economic plan for the future is the Fair Work Act that I put through the Parliament while Mr Abbott was sobbing in the sidelines wanting to bring back the worst aspects of work choices.
Look, it's tougher, but it's still not rivetingly exciting. And I welcome her promise to restore traditional cabinet government in Australia. Now, that's a very pointy-head issue, and it's a very complex one. It's not going to excite Australia. And that, I mean, work choices, another round of work choices, thud, thud, is getting extremely tedious. Something's got to happen in this campaign that is actually going to make us pay attention to what the government and, indeed, what the opposition is proposing to do. That sort of thing
that's the first mention of work choices over about 8 days, by my count. I mean, it just shows you how effectively that's been moved from the table.
And yet it dominated the first week.
And yet it did. And I gather that the ACTU, which has extracted money from all union workers across the country, is now about to relaunch one of its fatuous advertising campaigns.
It's already on air.
All on air.
I saw it last night.